Hi there. So this is Ferial Puren back with you on Ignite TV with the SRG conversation. That is a stop, reset, go conversation. And today I'm back here with my co-host, the handsome Andy Ferguson.
I'm glad you said handsome. I was waiting to see what you were going to say. I was thinking, what is she going to? Okay, yeah. I'm looking particularly dapper, I think, today, you know. So yeah, it's great to be here and to be sharing some space with you and our guest who you're just about to introduce.
Yes, today I'm really excited because with us today, we're going to be interviewing a friend, colleague, and an amazing man that is working in an area called rapid whole system change that Andy and I are also involved with, and he is called James-Gien Wong. But today we will not be calling him that. So today we will be calling him Gien because that's what that's how we address him, right? But his name is James-Gien Wong, and he's actually this whole idea that we talk about constantly with our courses that we do, Andy and I, and with our work that we do in general, this whole stop, reset, go idea. It's actually one that we stole from Gien. Or we're borrowing, or we're expanding on. I think we like that better. But I mean, stop, reset, go is something that all of you have done your whole lives, right? I mean, if you live in a country where you have traffic lights, or if you're South African like I am, we call them robots. I have no idea why we did that. But the thing is, since you've been a little kid, you were taught when you're crossing the road, stop, check, and then go, right? And when you're learning to drive, you know you've got to obey that same rule. So Gien took that little concept and just expanded on that and developed it into an idea where we can use that in our lives to live better, more sustainable, and happier lives. So we're going to talk to him a lot more about that. Andy and I, you know, our conversation is about understanding where we find ourselves right now, right? Amidst an international crisis where we find ourselves in a health crisis, in a economic crisis, as well as a psychological one. And the conversation with Gien is about how have we come to be here? Now, you guys know that's one of the questions that we tend to ask everyone that we're interviewing. But today, Gien happens to be someone that has been studying in this area along with others. So today we can actually have a much more informed response to that question. And the era that we find ourselves in right now is described by those who are studying it as the Anthropocene, right? So we're going to talk about words like that, and we're going to unpack that. So you might not know what that means right now, or you might not know what something like rapid whole system change means, or some of the words we'll probably be using in this conversation. But we will try and ensure that we unpack that so that you can understand that on a deeper level. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce our guest to you, Mr. James-Gien Wong. Hi, James. Or Gien.
Hi, Ferial. Hi, Andy. Thanks for having me on. And how would you like me to start? What would you like me to talk about first?
Well, I think first, probably just introduce yourself a little bit better, right? Because, I mean, it's one thing for me to introduce you, but it's another thing for you to tell us a little bit about the work that you're involved in. I just mentioned the word rapid whole system change. So tell us a little bit more about what that involves, and then probably the offshoots of some of the things that you then are involved in.
Okay. So maybe I'll begin by introducing myself quickly. So my name is James-Gien Wong, as Ferial said. I go by Gien, and that's I'm Cantonese. My parents were Cantonese, and so that's my heritage. So Gien means healthy in my language, Cantonese. So, but I kind of contradict that every time I eat junk food, but I tried otherwise to be healthy. And so I'm born in Canada, but then I fell in love with my future wife, and then came to South Africa, married her, and I've been here ever since for the last, I think, 12 years, coming on to 13 now. Yeah.
Okay, Gien, you do mean your present wife, right? You fell in love with your present wife.
Yeah, well, at the time, she was going to be my future wife. Yeah, yeah. So she's my present wife. Yeah. And so when I was in Canada, I was involved in electronic systems, telecommunications, research and development, and all that kind of stuff and technology for maybe 20, 30 years. I'm still doing that part-time to pay the bills. But since I came to South Africa, I've been more and more engaged in transferring my systems training and knowledge from kind of electrical engineering, electrical technology field into what I call whole system change, and not just whole system change, but rapid whole system change. So by that I mean that the kind of crisis that we face today, and when Ferial mentioned all the different ones, I was waiting for her to mention one more, and didn't come. But it's one she forgot. But it's obvious. It's the ecological crisis, the climate crisis. So that's another big one. So whole system change involves looking at not just at our own locality and our own individual life, but at the whole culture, the whole society, and how do we fit in as an individual and our families and our friends within that larger context. So that's the whole system. And so the whole system change is how it relates to us as individuals, is that when the whole system is not healthy, then everyone in that system is not healthy. So the families are suffering, the individuals are suffering. So all these crises are in a sense all interconnected, and they're interconnected temporally as well. That is through history, through time, connected through time by colonialism and the imperialism and colonialism from 5 centuries earlier, which trickled down and propagated generation after generation down to this very present moment. And so we're living with the consequences of centuries of really unhealed colonialism. There has been no serious attempt to undo all the harm that's been done, and it's still propagating. The legacy of colonialism is still very much with us today. And that manifests itself in the inequality that we experience in the world, as well as the climate crisis. Both are interconnected. Yeah, so that's. And why do we need rapid? Just one more thing. It's not just whole system change, but rapid whole system change. And the rapid is an adjective that's required because the ecological destruction is at such a high rate, occurring at such a high rate today and there's so many problems, and they're all affecting each other with feedback loops that many leading scientists forecast that we really only have about 5 to 10 years to make substantial change before organized human life may look quite different.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, one of the things that I think for me, I know we're presenting a lot of this information here to some of our students and things like that. And so some of the questions that I would have is, look, I don't think we intended to bring ourselves into the situation that we're in, right? I almost see our whole experience of life as some massive experiment, right? Because look, we founded these incredible areas of study where we experiment, we test, we try, we prototype, we experiment, we realize, look, this is not working, so we're going to try a different method. And it's that methodology of testing and trying, and that is scientific research, really. So if we were to look at ourselves on a greater scale, and look at that as possibly being exactly what we're doing with life, right? So whilst I agree that, look, most of what we've created was not intended for our demise or harm or to harm anything else, right? But we realized, wow, we could do this better, we could do that, because that's the thing about us, like Homo sapien sapien, I think that's what we call, and we like to organize ourselves, and we like to into groups where we communicate and we build things and we co-create things. And that's what really separates us from, I guess, all of the other organisms that live on our planet along with us, right? We can create tools. We talk to one another and we can create tools. So it actually puts us at the top of the food chain, even though physically we're not really at the top of the food chain. But our ability to create these tools and coordinate ourselves in groups allows us to do that. So what then happens is we find ourselves now in a scenario where we have created some chaotic things along with a lot of the really great things that we create, right, over our existence on this planet. So the question that I have here is, in scientific research, because this is not a new idea to us, because in our scientific research, we're able to prototype, see our results, suggest a different way of moving forward. And it's quite a, it's what we do. But how come we find ourselves now where we, for example, we've gone through eras. You talk about colonialism. Colonialism was not just, oftentimes when I'm thinking about English colonialism, British colonialism, but actually it's been happening since the beginning of us being here, right? So many different eras have come and gone of that same thing, someone conquering others, right? So why is it that when we recognize as human beings that something like capitalism or communism or whatever isms that we have gotten ourselves into, and we realize it's no longer doing what we thought it would do? So in other words, we experimented, but we become so invested that we no longer, we don't know how to start something different. Why is it that we're able to do that? So in your work, could you unpack some of that for me? We are able to somehow do it within scientific experimentation, but not seeing that our own lives, our own situation is exactly the same, a reflection, just in maybe a grander scale. But when we clearly can feel things are not working, and we can clearly see things are not working, we have many scientific evidence showing us things are not working. Why do we continue to invest in that and not change? What's happening to us?
Okay, thanks for the question, Ferial. So the area of research that, the name of the area of research that deals with that is called progress traps. And a progress trap is the amalgamation of two words, progress, which we all know, and trap. We all know that word as well. But when you put those two together, progress trap, it means that your progress leads to something unintended. It traps you. That traps you. Okay, something that's unintended. So it's an unintended consequence. So that old expression, the best laid plans of mice and men. So we can plan as much as we can, but there's always something that's there that could cause us a problem later on. So if one looks at one's own personal life, you can already see how this works, because it really a progress trap, and is multiple progress traps over many centuries, accumulating and building on each other and feeding back on each other, is exactly how we got here today as a global society. So you can actually look at how that occurs just by looking at one's own life, because we all of us plan to do things, and planning is a part of human nature. When you decide, I'm going to go get some grocery shopping done, you got to make a plan, right? You have to know when you're going to go. You have to get your keys. You have to know where they are. Then you have to go into this vehicle if it's far away and you have to drive there, and you have to then grab a buggy, and then you have to go put things in the buggy and go to the checkout. So all that requires planning, at every moment, and it could be long-term, short-term, different scales of planning, right? So everything, all of human life is really, all our actions are planned a lot of times. But when you plan something, sometimes you get an unintended consequence, right? Sometimes you plan to do something, you never plan to hit another car, right? But sometimes we have accidents, right? And sometimes, you're going to grab a cup to drink, and you spill it, right? So, you have the intention, and then you have something else happens other than the target, right? Yeah. Something else happens on the way.
But in those scenarios, we're able to respond to something else happening. Why are we not able, why as a society are we not responding? I mean, I know some of us are, but as a society, like, we seem to be like, you know, and
Okay,
just,
let me give you one example that we all are familiar with now, because it's related to climate change. You know, back in the early 1900s, people use kerosene as a way to light. Uh, um, when it's dark at night, they use kerosene to create a light by burning it, you know, with kerosene lamps. But then some scientists discovered that this thick, black, liquidy substance could actually be processed and refined and be a substitute for that would replace the kerosene. So that was basically petroleum. Petroleum comes from petroleum, right? And a Polish scientist learned how to refine that into something that could be used as an energy source, right? So after a lot of study, you know, a lot of chemical engineering and studying and seeing that it was safe for people at that time, safe, they gave it the green light, and so petroleum became a product, and then they began finding petroleum reserves in Texas and all over the place, and all of a sudden you had this boom, because all of a sudden you had this huge abundant reserves of petroleum. All you had to do was, you know, basically puncture the ground, and it just came gushing out.
yeah,
And but then in the 1950s in Hawaii, a scientist discovered that a relationship between burning this fossil fuel and rising temperatures, right, and CO2 emissions. And so that was the beginning of the relationship between climate change and burning fossil fuels,
yeah.
right? So, but by that time, you know, Henry Ford had already created mass production with the Model T and cars and internal combustion engines of every shape and form and variety. And so capitalism scaled it globally and made it an integral part of modern life.
Yeah.
So this is what happens with technology. It's what happened with petroleum is the kind of quintessential problem with technology that has serious unintended consequences. So by the time that people knew that there was a possible problem with burning it, it had already scaled to such a large extent that so many people were invested in jobs related to petroleum related industries, you know, and it becomes very difficult now. And you have, once you have vested interests that have a huge amounts of money invested, it's very difficult to change that. You have the onus then becomes on you to prove that it's a problem. And in some cases, they will, because of the vested interest, they'll try to create obstacles for you to prove that, right? So it's not surprising.
So what I'm hearing is it's about the fact that we have an interest, and and we don't want to be losing money, right? So
And livelihood.
Yeah, well, this is important for everyone, right? I mean, so it's kind of there's a lot of stuff going on, in other words, right? So it's not an easy thing to unravel. And that's why
I'll just interject quickly, and then you can finish your train of thought. That's called a wicked problem. A wicked problem is when the people who are trying to solve the problem have a vested interest in the problem. That's one way to look at a wicked problem. This entanglement, right? Where you're trying to solve the problem, but you depend on the problem actually persisting.
Yeah.
That's what makes it wicked in most cases, in many cases.
Yeah. So I know that you've dedicated a huge part of your life and time along with others to then studying and looking at what could we possibly do about this dilemma, right? Because it's a really amazing, like huge dilemma for us as a society. So we talked earlier, I introduced the idea of the Anthropocene, right? So would you mind unpacking just a little bit for us? Most of our viewers might not know what that word means. What does that mean?
The Anthropocene is, the easiest way to think about it is it's the age of human impacts. So it's the time that we're living in where we're seeing the usually negative impacts of human civilization, all the things that we've done. you know, the our effects of agriculture on so much of the surface of the earth, city building, burning all the fossil fuels, overfishing, taking too much resources everywhere, and too much pollution load everywhere. So the Anthropocene is actually a geological concept. Geologists have proposed it, and they are currently debating, trying to find what the signal is that signaled the beginning of this age. And there's a debate going on in geological science, because one camp says that human impacts have been quite serious and that you can see markers around. And another camp argues that within geological sciences, geological sciences are measured in hundreds of thousands or millions of years. So human beings have only been around for, like, modern humans have only been around 100,000 years. And we've only had agriculture since 10,000 years ago. So we're kind of like a,
Sorry, Gian, I want to ask you a question at this point, right?
Go ahead.
Because
Sure.
I think it's quite interesting that from what I understand about your work and the things that you're interested in at the moment, it's interesting, isn't it? Because you're particularly interested in the impact that humans are having and have had cumulatively, and yet it's quite difficult to know, because you said modern humans have been around 100,000 years or so, right? The archaeological work that's going on at the moment is saying, well, we can't even really define what a modern human is, because the more that they're finding other species of humans, they're actually saying these have got a lot of characteristics of Homo sapiens sapiens or whatever. And it was something that Ferial and I worked on for nearly a year. We came up with this idea of this core statement that had this set of words in it that represented a concept that we were trying to encapsulate. And Ferial corrected me the other day. She said, we were arguing about a couple of the words, and she corrected me the other day, and I thought it was really fascinating, because what she said is, throughout every stage, or throughout each stage, and the point she was trying to make is that there is this continuum. There is no kind of discrete block. That's how we humans tend to, we want to categorize, clump things together and give them a label, when in fact we're really we're always talking about a continuum from one thing. And the other thing I was just going to throw at you and see what your response is, that a lot of these things that are happening, although they're continuums, they're actually asynchronistic continuums. So something's happening and developing over here where something else isn't developing, and then that thing starts to move, and this other thing kind of slows down, and then those two things clash or harmonize or whatever it is. So when you were talking about a wicked problem, part of what we've got is this idea that what do you compartmentalize? How do you break things down? How do you enter this Cartesian world of science and engineering, and yet those are just constructs. So I don't know if you can unpack some of that for us.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with you. We construct our reality through language. Language is used to divide the world into categories. So obviously, when you're dealing with a concept like modern humans, the professional scientists and archaeologists and anthropologists, they debate, and through peer review research, they determine what the age of a modern human is, as an example, right? But research is always ongoing, and it can push that boundary back further in time. So if you look at evolutionary history, it's kind of arbitrary in a sense where you put that endpoint marker for a species, because it's like from an evolutionary point of view, we came from amoebas and many other types of species. So where's the boundary, between a human being and all the other stages? You can look at how a human being itself is formed from when the sperm inseminates the egg. You know, from that moment till when the childbirth and the fetus leaves the womb, there's a whole continuum of progress between those 2 points. And so, you know, when people are debating the end of life, you know, and abortionists and so on, where's that end point of where's a human being begin, and when does it not begin? Where is it not considered human? When is it considered human, right? So we human beings always put these arbitrary lines in nature. Nature is a continuum. So that's you know, and that's part of I think that's part of the understanding that's one learns when one learns about one goes deeply into one's own humanity, you know. And that's, you know, one area of research that I've been developing is called Deep Humanity. And Deep Humanity is an open source protocol that deals with questions like that, but many other dimensions of being human. Like how we use language and to construct our reality. And then how that constructed reality causes us to behave within, you know, within that lexicon of symbols.
Yeah.
So these are very deep questions.
Of course. So, Gien, I would like to just take a break a little while, but to say thank you thus far. We're going to come back into this conversation in a minute, and I wanted to ask you just to before we go out of this moment, just let us know. I know you've been busy writing a book, right? And a large part of the focus is on this deep humanity. So, what is the title of your book? And then just very quickly describe what it's about, and then we're going to get into the conversation, or you're going to talk a little bit more about that.
Okay. Well, the book is that I'm going to write is, I haven't settled on the title yet, but the tentative title is Deep Humanity, and then the subtitle is one possible subtitle is Rediscovering the Sacred in the Anthropocene, or in the Age of the Anthropocene.
Yeah.
So that's one possible
Awesome.
title. But it comes from a research paper which has a different title. Right now, it's in the form of a very large research paper, which is quite, I don't know if you want me to read the title, it's quite a complex sounding title.
That's okay. I think we're going to unpack the title and what it's about, because we're going to talk a lot more about your research document when we get back to the conversation.
Okay.
So let's go for a break, and we will be back. Thank you.
Thank you.